It's a new day here in Boston, and with that comes new opportunities to learn about all the most exciting topics in material science. From the brightest minds to the most novel ideas, the only place to get it all is right here on MRS TV. I'm Katie Brace, back again to share all the highlights of this fall's MRS meeting. We have another great show ahead of us today. We'll sit down with Carolyn Duran to reflect on her tenure as MRS president. Then we'll break down the ideas presented at this meeting's Energy Sustainability by 2050 panel. And we'll continue our worldwide tour of innovative materials research from Pennsylvania to Germany to Hong Kong. But before all that, we'll hear from Jenny Nelson, our fall 2022 Kavli Lecture Speaker, about her presentation on solar energy conversion.
As a kid, I was always interested in light and color. I don't know why. And I asked my mom was a chemist. I said, what subject do you have to study if you want to learn about light and color? And she said, you have to study physics, and it's hard. And I did. I think the main drivers were just, I find it very, very interesting. And then I've also always been very strongly motivated that if we do science, we should be doing science in order to improve the state of the world for social benefit, for human benefit, for environmental benefit, not just for interest's sake. So when I started working in this field 20 years ago, the best solar cell was probably about 2% efficient. And since then, the efficiency has risen, of the best devices, risen to almost 20%. This is remarkable. At one stage, we didn't think it would reach 10. We didn't think it would reach 15. And now it's just about pushing 20. As I was talking in the lecture today, the thing which compromises the power conversion efficiency of organic solar cells is non-radiative recombinations. A photon has been absorbed in the material and it's generated an electron and hole, and rather than being collected, they recombine, but they recombine through a process that gives out heat rather than a process that gives out a photon. And that is something that in principle can be avoided. And one of the things that we don't really know at the moment is how far it can be avoided in molecular materials, because by their nature, they're soft materials, and there's a coupling between the electronic states and the vibrational modes of the material that helps this non-radiative recombination to occur. If we sort of take a model of the future and you say, I want to have a net zero planet by 2050, and you give it all the resources that we know about, the model will come back and say, you need to install a lot of solar. Currently, we probably produce about maybe 3 or 4% of the world's electricity with solar PV. That's got to go up to probably more than 50%. It depends how much we'll get from wind. It depends how other technologies perform. It could need to be more than that. So I'd say we're an order of magnitude away from where we need to be in terms of solar energy conversion, and we need to get there quite quickly, I would say within a decade or two. In terms of implementation, we need to connect this variable source of electricity with demand. We don't always have the electricity generated at the time or the place where you need it, so we need to transmit it. We also need to store it. So we need all of this infrastructure and associated technologies. We need this sort of electrical engineering and storage technologies. Those are things that can be solved. There's also other things that have got nothing to do with material science, like decisions made by governments, political will, international cooperation. And those things have to be solved at an absolute priority in order to enable the technological solutions, which pretty much they're either there or they're coming along quite rapidly to play their part.
The Hong Kong Quantum AI Lab and the HKU-CAS Joint Laboratory on New Materials is on a mission to develop new classes of materials with applications across scientific disciplines. Jointly established by the University of Hong Kong and Caltech, HKQAI promotes international collaborations with the world's top researchers.
The department is particularly focused on photofunctional materials. That means molecules or material that carry the function upon light irradiation. We have a strong track record to study electronic excited states, how to generate, how to understand it, and how to modulate. The original objective of Hong Kong U Trans-Academic Science Joint Laboratory on New Material actually should hopefully to establish a platform whereby the chemists and physicists and together with the scientists from Trans-Academic Science could collaborate together. With this kind of collaboration, hopefully that will uncover new materials. This is the golden time for the materials research, partly also because of the establishment of the Hong Kong Quantum AI Laboratory. The idea is using machine learning and also this kind of big data analysis in the design of the new materials.
MRS TV is here with someone very important, 2022 MRS President Carolyn Duran. Carolyn, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
So we spoke to you a year ago when your presidency was just beginning, and now that you're wrapping up this past year, what are some of the advances that MRS has made in this past year?
Thank you for asking that. I think one of the biggest things that I'm most excited about is the coming back to in-person meetings. The second is we got a new editor-in-chief of the JMR, so Ramesh, and having him on board and some of the changes that the whole leadership team with respect to the journals and driving the journals forward as we've established the nice relationship with Springer Nature has been really exciting as well.
And when we talk about MRS, how do you feel that societies like MRS can fill a role with industrial members moving forward?
That's a really good question, and it's something I think that we're still working on and trying to grow. A lot of the membership are students and academics and national labs. We've been brainstorming things like speed mentoring, and if you're coming and deciding whether you want to be in industry or academia, can you learn from junior members of industry? And then that for industry, the benefit is having the researchers here. The cross-disciplinary part of MRS is really compelling. We hire material scientists, but we also hire applied physicists and chemists and all the different things. So I think that's a place where we can really stretch and grow.
So MRS has been around for 49 years. It's about to celebrate 50 years. Can you give us a preview of what's kind of in store for this 50th anniversary?
Yes, we have a lot planned. So I'm super excited. It's just a little younger than me, but coming back to San Francisco after our hiatus in different regions, that's super exciting for us. I'm also really excited about some of the things we're doing, where we're doing batches, like through the years, just to understand and learn. And I've personally been reading up on some of the early days of MRS and how we've changed and grown as a society. The third thing is we've really advanced in our diversity and inclusion efforts. And so you'll see a big focus next year as well as part of the 50th anniversary, just continuing to accelerate, hopefully, the means with which we engage across the world in different demographics.
So building on that, where do you see MRS going in the future, and what advice would you have for the incoming president?
For Sabrina, so enjoy that 50th anniversary for sure, and she is absolutely dedicated to diversity and inclusion, so I know she's going to really provide that focus and help the society move forward. It's one thing. The second thing is understanding and dealing with the in-person and virtual, and how can we, between meetings, continue those dialogues and discussions and collaborations so that it's not a pop in the spring and a pop in the fall, but it's a steady state of learning opportunities for our membership.
Thanks so much for joining us, Carolyn. Coming up next, we'll talk with Rachel Meidl about this week's iteration of the Recurring Materials Needs for Energy Sustainability by 2050 panel. We are now with Dr. Rachel Meidl of the Baker Institute for Public Policy at Rice University. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So let's talk about an MRS ongoing event entitled Materials Needs for Energy Sustainability by 2050. You are part of a panel discussion entitled Enabling a Circular Polymer Bioeconomy. So tell us why this session is going on.
Well, as you know, plastics is a major crisis right now. We have an insurgence of plastic waste across the globe. And so, you know, plastics are a ubiquitous part of our everyday society and a very integral component. I mean, it's used for lightweighting vehicles, which help in fuel efficiency. It helps preserve food. And many people don't realize that plastics is a really integral component of the energy transition and an input for renewable energies like solar panels and electric vehicles and batteries and so forth. But it is also a waste crisis. And so the panel discussion today, we're discussing how we can transition from a linear economy to a circular economy in ways that leverages the bioeconomy, making polymers more circular, how we can tap into biological resources. And then we'll be discussing issues like how can we increase the sustainability, and are these circular biopolymers actually circular and sustainable?
So basically 80% of the plastics we have produced in the past 70 years are in landfills or out there in the environment. This is a huge number. So what's the role of material science in achieving a circular polymer economy?
Most of the focus for circular economy over the years has been on the end of life, waste management and recycling. So in a truly circular economy, activities move further upstream at the design phase. And that's where material science comes into play. Mm-hmm. In a circular economy, we can design and re-engineer plastics and polymers to have longer lifespans, to be more durable, to ideally have infinite recycling. And so that's the whole role of material science.
If we look back at a previous discussion back in 2018 on circular economy, one of the panelists pointed out the energy expenditure to recycle some of these materials exceeded the energy required to create them in the first place.
That's true. A lot of life cycle assessments show that plastics have greater performance than things like glass and plastics and fibers and steel. But we have to keep in mind that in assessing life cycle assessments, we have to look at the scope and the boundaries. And some life cycle assessments just look at production phase or manufacturing phase. Ideally, we want to look at the entire life cycle from cradle to grave. And so when we look at, when we compare different types of materials, what we really want to do is to have a broader systematic picture of all the impacts. And we have to just go beyond emissions. We have to go beyond just energy inputs. And so that's where things like sustainable life cycle assessments can come into play, where we integrate things like life cycle costing with a broader range of environmental impacts alongside things like social life cycle assessments, so we can get a true understanding of what those impacts are across society.
So let's go back to the panel that you're on this time around, and there's representatives from academia, national labs, and industry. Why is it so important to have all of these folks talking about this topic?
Well, the plastic waste crisis, it's a global issue. It affects everybody. I mean, like I said, plastics are an integral part of society, but the solutions are complex. There's not one silver bullet that can tackle this entire issue. And so having academics at the table, coupled with industry and government, and even your average consumer, really broadens the discussion because it integrates diverse viewpoints, and that helps drive better policy solutions and better outcomes.
All right, Dr. Rachel Meidl, thank you so much. Thanks to its world-class research faculty, Penn State's Materials Research Institute is pushing the boundaries of materials exploration in areas such as 2D materials, ferroelectric dielectrics, and gallium nitride. All of this combines to put Penn State in the top position as a hub for the semiconductor industry.
Penn State research has been making a positive and meaningful impact on our students, our communities, our nation, and the world. We pursue national and global grand challenges like the CHIPS Act. We're making advances in thin crystals that support the semiconductor industry and national security. And we're developing advances in energy to address climate challenges worldwide.
Penn State is one of the leading universities in relation to interdisciplinary research. MRI is one of the institutes that then crosses many departments and many colleges at Penn State. We also have a very close relationship with industry. And we also run the core facilities, such as the nanofab, of where over the last 10 years, we've been really positioning ourselves for closer and closer relationships for next generation electronics.
In Halle, Germany, the Max Planck Institute is looking for PhD students and postdocs to work with highly motivated scientists in their top-of-the-line facilities to do the impossible and change the world. Could MPI Halle be a good fit for you? Let's find out.
We want to do the impossible in the sense we want to go beyond what others have done, we want to push the boundaries of science, and we want to create entirely new materials and devices that could in the future create new technologies that can change the world.
We collaborate with our colleagues here so that we can reap the benefits of all of our facilities and share our expertise.
The Max Planck Institute allows me a lot of flexibility to combine research and also family life. And I'm a theoretician working in an experimental department, and this gives me the chance to discuss with many experimentalists to change my perspective on the science.
We have unlimited resources and unlimited support from our director and from the institute.
We create these materials one atomic layer at a time. These materials then have fundamentally new properties, so we're interested in exploring these properties, but we're also interested in using these materials to create entirely new technologies, particularly in the domain of digital storage and computing. So for those of you interested in carrying out cutting-edge research, potentially with impact on technologies in the future, please come and join us here at the Max Planck Institute of Microstructure Physics in Halle. You're all very welcome.
So my main inspiration for my research is my mentor, Dr. Babak Inisori. So he's one of the inventors or discoverers of Maxine. And since he's come to IUPUI, we've really kind of blown up and are making a name for research. So it's able to build a lab and kind of be like the first people in our area to be doing what we're doing. That's really gets me going, I guess.
I've been particularly here to meet some of the guys here, like Professor Harry Atwater here, and Dr. Capasso, which I just missed now. So I'm just catching him. So these are the guys who have really inspired me to go to the field, into the field of nanophotonics. And they have been one of the core reasons that I'm working on in this kind of nanophotonics field.
My PhD mentor is Katia Bertoldi. She's a professor at Harvard University. And so she's been a very good mentor, very supportive, very hardworking, and always have her own passion for her career.
For my interest in science, my principal for high school was the one that inspired me because he was always particular about mathematics, and that directed me to science.
MRS offers discounted memberships for those working or studying in developing countries. These memberships are funded by the Materials Research Society Foundation. Visit the MRS website to learn more.
Visit engagemrs.org to find out how your organization can team up with MRS to reach the materials science community. Find out more about exhibit and sponsorship opportunities, our corporate partner program, webinar sponsorships, bulletin advertising, and more.
MRS embraces diversity, equity, and inclusion by actively engaging our global membership, supporting the careers of underrepresented researchers, and investing in community actions to address bias and end inequities. In support of the DEI aspiration, MRS is pleased to announce the recent launch of its 6 new diversifying materials special interest groups. These member-only communities foster networking and community building around common interests. Find out more about these special interest groups by contacting MRS at mrs.org/contact.
Visit booth 723 in the exhibit hall Tuesday through Thursday to find the MRS journal that meets your materials topic and stage of research, meet our editors, learn about new author services and discounted open access for MRS members, and more. And be sure to take a selfie.
Don't just read our journals, contribute to them. By submitting your work to an MRS journal, you'll reach a global audience and have an impact that will extend for many years. MRS publishes cutting-edge research, perspectives, and review articles, along with books and textbooks.
Joining us now is Dr. Chad Mirkin. Dr. Mirkin, thanks for being with us.
Pleasure to be here.
And first off, congratulations, a big congratulations on being named the 2022 winner of the MRS medal.
Thank you.
It's a big honor. Your award citation reads, for the invention and implementation of nanoparticle mega libraries for materials discovery. So tell us more about this and how it led to this award.
Well, it's kind of an interesting development. Over the last 20 years, we've been developing a whole series of techniques based upon scanning probe instruments that first allowed you to locally pattern on surfaces to make miniaturized electronic circuits. And then we parallelized those types of capabilities and transformed them from single tip type tools to tools that have as many as 11 million tips in a 3-inch silicon wafer size device. And each of those tips now can be used to locally synthesize materials. So in mass, you can make in one experiment more materials than scientists have made cumulatively since the beginning of time. We've taken these tools that were developed as readers, turned them into writers, transformed the writers then into massive synthesis tools where each tip can act like tiny little fingers to do a different chemical synthesis, make a different material at a specific site on a particular chip. That allows you to create encoded chips, chips that have more materials than we've cumulatively made to date. And those materials then are shots on goal for materials that can make a difference in many different applications. So then we screen them in mass, looking for new materials that have either interesting chemical or physical properties that can drive new applications.
So this really has a wide range of applications and also fields that it could affect.
I would humbly say this is about transforming the way we discover and explore new materials, because it dramatically accelerates how fast we can make materials, how fast we can screen materials, how fast we can identify materials that are winners, separating them from losers. And the last part of this is this also represents the most powerful way of collecting big data in the materials discovery space. And that data is really of high value because it can be used to train AI and machine learning algorithms to begin to objectively create machine learning and AI capabilities that allow us to look at all the different possible combinations and narrow down what we should be going after.
I know a lot of people look up to you, so what would be your words of inspiration to them?
follow what you're most excited and passionate about. Don't pick things because they're fashionable. Don't pick things because you think you should do it because other people. My mother wanted me to be a doctor. That would have been the biggest mistake of my life. A medical doctor.
Right. Yeah, figured as much. So when you go back to the lab, what are you most excited about doing next?
Look, I'm excited every day I go back to the lab because we've got one of the largest research operations in the world, and somebody has always made an interesting observation or discovery that just fires everybody else up. And that's the real luxury of being at Northwestern and having a program where you've got some of the smartest people from all over the world converging, bringing their talents to really push the frontiers forward. All of it, to me, is really, really exciting.
All right. Well, Dr. Chad Mirkin, thank you so much for taking the time, and congratulations as well.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure.
Thanks again, Chad, for a great conversation. And with that, our second episode of MRS TV is in the books. We still have 2 more episodes chock full of fascinating interviews, insightful sessions, and more glimpses into the best that the MRS Fall Meeting has to offer. You can keep watching MRS TV on screens around the Hines and Sheridan, on the MRS website, in select hotels, and on YouTube and Twitter. Tune in again on Wednesday to learn about the MRS Government Affairs and Congressional Fellowship Program. See how improvisational comedy can beef up your public speaking skills, and so much more. I'm Katie Brace, and I'll see you tomorrow.